Hello, everyone. Um, we're back for another episode of the Friday Blowdown. It's going to be great. Going to have Lisa DeJong on shortly. She's going to be talking to us about cycle seasons, self-care, menstrual cycle awareness, all of this fantastic stuff. Brilliant topic. Absolutely fantastic. Did a course with her as well, so she's fantastic, and she's just come on. So I'm going to add her in. Hopefully she'll be coming on now.
Hi,
Hello,
Sinead.
Lisa.
How are you?
How are you? How are you getting on?
Good to
Good.
see you. Long
Yeah,
time no see.
likewise. I know it's been a while, but I've been following you on Instagram still, just being like, oh, hello.
Likewise. Yeah, likewise. You're doing great. I love all the lives. I was catching up on them today.
Yeah, no, they're fun. I really like them. I just did it. I probably should be admit this, but I'm just going to admit it anyway. But I did it just as a pure. I really want to start it. I'll just give it a go, and then each week I do them. I'm like, I love this. I just love chatting to people and seeing kind of
Yeah,
what they're doing, and I guess just covering all the different topics of women's health as well, because it's so wide ranging. So it's really interesting. And I always learn something, which is great.
it's amazing, Sinead. And like people will learn as well. And I think I'm the same. I started doing a few lives recently because I needed the connection, but I feel like if I need it, other people need it. So,
Yeah,
may as well do.
absolutely. No, it's so good. And it was you're definitely one that I was thinking about to get to come on because obviously I guess with my background and all the personal training side, a lot of people who kind of follow me are more into the kind of sports side of things and everything. But it's, that's just one aspect of menstrual cycle health and menstrual cycle awareness and how you can kind of bring all of that in to I guess our everyday lives. And like for me, I'm definitely a mix of the two. Like I'm pretty sure I read the Roar book by Dr. Stacey Sims, followed then by Period Power by Maisie Hill to get that like lovely mix of the two. And then I came across yourself and everything. So no, I'm sure I'm not the only one out there who has that kind of that mix or wants to know more. And when I put up about it a while ago about cycle season, so many people weren't aware of what that was. So I was like, oh, I'll have to get Lisa on and do a whole session about it and talk all about it. Yeah, exactly. But I guess do you want to introduce yourself? Kind of tell people who you are, what you
Sure.
do, your
Yeah,
story.
sure. Sure. I just see Erica has joined. Hi, Erica.
Yeah.
um, I am Lisa DeJong. It's funny, Sinead, like you might have the same thing as well now that you're branching into this work. Like, I don't
Mm,
really know what my title is anymore
I know.
because I do. Like, I said recently to someone, like, I know what I do, I just don't know what to call myself. And I think that's
Yeah,
more important. So, like,
it's so true.
I'll try and use language, just for convenience. A women's health coach is what I describe myself as, and I specialize in the menstrual cycle. And what my practice looks like is helping people to live a little bit more in sync with their cycle.
Hmm.
So whether they're struggling with pain or endometriosis or PMDD or something, or if they just want general like better energy management around the cycle, and
Hmm.
then that can kind of go like it can be very practical, like diet, lifestyle, those things, and it can also go a little bit deeper into like our how we relate in our relationships, boundaries, trauma from the past, and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's quite varied, but generally speaking, it's all rooted in the menstrual cycle awareness, which I think is what we're going to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think, when people hear the term menstrual cycle awareness, it's kind of used in different contexts. But I guess in the work that you do, what what does that mean and what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Integration is the first word that comes to mind.
Okay.
So there's an education piece. So yeah, like understanding what menstrual cycle awareness is.
Hmm.
And I describe that firstly as an embodied mindfulness practice. So for anyone that's studied mindfulness, which I think at this point most of us have done a mini course on or read a
Yeah.
book or even read a quote, they kind of know what it is. John Kabat-Zinn, one of my favorite teachers, his definition is a non-judgmental awareness of the present moment.
Hmm.
So it's that non-judgmental awareness piece. And then menstrual cycle awareness is what I describe as a non-judgmental awareness of where you are in your menstrual cycle on any given day. So it's learning to recognize where we are in our menstrual cycle, whether we're on day one of our period or whether we're ovulating or whether we're
Mm.
a week before we menstruate, and that is relevant in our lives, and just understanding how we can maybe self-care a little bit better, what our needs are in terms of our diet or our lifestyle and our relationships. And not that we have to fit into a mold of what it should be, but
Mm.
rather what it is, how it presents, and meeting that with action or meeting that with acceptance. So it depends on what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's so important as well, because I know this was a live that you did, I think it was yesterday, with Periods by Carmen, and
Yeah.
the on the perfectionism element. And I haven't watched it yet, it's on my to do, because I was like, damn, I can't make it at that time, but I have it on my thing to watch back. But even, I've seen a kind of couple of posts with you coming in and everything. I thought it was so important, because you kind of, the whole I guess idea of menstrual cycle awareness is that whole non-judgmental piece that I think is really important, that we often forget about, and I'm guilty of doing it as well. But you can see it as well, where it's fantastic that there's more awareness about menstrual cycle health and kind of how your energies change and how you might want to train at different stages, but also that's not going to be everyone's experience. So this whole concept of like fixing the period and having this perfect cycle and all this kind of stuff, it almost adds like an extra pressure, being like, well, I don't have a 28-day cycle, and actually I sometimes feel crap when I ovulate and feel really good when I'm PMSing, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, so it's like it's that whole idea that like, oh, my cycle's backwards, or maybe there's something certain going on. So I think that's like a huge part of it, or a really interesting part of the kind of work that you do, is that non-judgmental part of it.
Yeah, I think so. Because what I see is, and what I've experienced is that periods are either shamed or pathologized, right?
Mm,
So we're not supposed to talk about them, or else if we do talk about it, it's a problem that needs to be fixed by a
yeah,
doctor who knows more than we do. And actually, and yes, sometimes there is a pathology, there is something that needs to be
of
treated and
course.
that needs care. But then even when we do get care, and I'm only going to speak from my own experience with this,
Yeah,
like I've treated for endometriosis in the past, and there's still days where I'm like doing all the right things, and it's still, I still have problems. And then where do I go with that? What do I do
mm,
with that in myself? And for a long time, I was giving myself a hard time about that. I didn't know, because I had read all the books, did all the right things, and
yeah,
didn't understand. I just didn't understand. So when I came across cycle awareness and the more feminine side to this work of building intimacy with my experience, more compassion, more self-acceptance, then that's really hard, but it really, really helped me to feel better and take the pressure off, very practically speaking, in
yeah,
terms of
yeah.
like,
And
yeah.
how did you kind of come across this, in the first way? Was it kind of through the Red School, or had you come across it in anywhere else before, or?
Red School, yeah, right. I'm pretty sure that Alexandra Pope, she coined those terms, the
Yeah,
seasons. So what happened was I had come off the pill in my early 20s, and um, the doctors didn't really know what to do with me. And this was like before endometriosis was being talked about like in the mainstream, like it is
yeah,
now,
yeah,
sometimes in the mainstream. And I was just desperate. The doctor wanted to put me back on the pill again, and I was getting lots of side effects, and I just wanted to consider alternative options. And then I got really good at Googling. I know that's a ridiculous thing to say now, but back then I knew like how to, I knew how to work Google, and I found Red School in the UK, and I did like one of their first online courses when there were only
mm,
like few people doing it, and did their training. And then I discovered other things like Maya massage therapy and castor oil packs and steaming and things that are more normalized nowadays. But
mm,
they were, I was finding these what I would consider more alternative practices
yeah,
before people were talking about them. So, and because I was in such pain, Sinead, I was just, to be honest, like desperate to try anything.
yeah. You're like, if there's a smidgen that will work, I'll do it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
no, I was pretty desperate. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like for anyone who is listening, like obviously I've talked about kind of the Red School, and I haven't done the course, but like loved their book. And I actually kind of came across their stuff by reading Maisie Hill's book first, where she kind of referenced it again, obviously with permission and stuff like that. And I was like, this is actually fascinating. I really want to learn more about this kind of more, I guess, spiritual and kind of like self care sort of side to it, and this kind of more like energy side, or I guess creative energies as well, which I'm going to ask about you about that later on as well. But do you want to explain, I guess, for people who are listening there, like what those seasons are, what those kind of terms now, which loads of people are using, which is fantastic, but kind of what they are and what they mean.
Exactly. Yeah, sure. So, like yourself, Sinead, I love to look at the science side, and
Yeah,
hormones, because I see like that, like we experience life through our physicality, like we are a body,
yeah,
we have flesh and bones and hormones and blood. And so we experience life through this somatic thing. And because our hormones are ebbing and flowing, that means then that, and because the endocrine system is like it's a highway in our body that impacts so many different parts of who we are.
yeah,
Our hormones they're all connected, so it's all relevant, and therefore the menstrual cycle isn't actually, surprise, a separate part of our of
yeah,
who we are. It's relevant for all of us, and it's just about re-including that. So the seasons that Sinead is talking about are archetypes or metaphors to kind of describe what the hormones are doing around the different weeks of the menstrual cycle. So so the first one is winter. So that's menstruation. That's I actually describe, and Alexandra says this as well, and I really like this. It's actually not the onset of menstruation. It's 1 or 2 days before menstruation,
mm,
when the person is feeling low energy or brain fog, or for me, I would get very weepy before my period
mm,
sometimes, or you might get cravings or things like that, or you're just like, you just don't really know yourself. So that's sort of like on an energetic level, your hormones are starting to drop, and therefore, um, the archetype would be considered winter. So winter being inward focused, our psychology is more like coming inside.
yeah,
Um, we can be a lot more emotionally, physically tender, vulnerable. And so for some people that would be more obvious, and then it can be more subtle for other people.
yeah,
So as I said, like it'll be a different experience for everyone. So that's winter, and that's actually like the engine room of the menstrual cycle. So the more we can down tools, the more we can nourish ourselves, the more we can be present with ourselves. This is a prime time to plug in our phone charger, to really
yeah,
like reboot the system, even if it is just for a couple hours. And I know that can be like, it's a lot easier said than done. I know myself, like if I rest, I sometimes will be on my phone or watching something on Netflix, and
mm,
it's very hard to actually shut down the mind, and rest. So it's asking for help, preparing your meals in advance. For me, also wearing loose clothing if I have pain, so things,
yeah,
little things like that. So that's winter, and that's when the hormones drop to their lowest level, which allows for menstruation to happen. And then as we journey through winter, we come into, on an energetic level, we come into spring. So that's when estrogen is starting to rise, and we might still be bleeding, so it might be the end of your period.
mm-hmm,
But the energetic expression of that is you have more energy, you have more interest in the outside world. You might feel more desire to go exercise more, to pick up higher, like heavier weights, things like that, do more
yeah,
cardio. Your libido will increase. So, life, and for some people, life is easier. Life is, you don't have the pain anymore. So,
yeah,
so it's spring. Now the thing about spring, Sinead, is that it's a transition season, as you know. So, I describe it as a negotiation. So it's very easy to push ourselves through spring, and then we can burn out come summer.
yeah,
So, on a psychological level, it is a lovely, gorgeous, tender time, but if it can be, we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and when we put a lot of pressure on ourselves in the spring phase, we feel the effects of that inner critic can be quite harmful during the spring. So that's winter, spring. Then we come to summer. So this is ovulation. This is the time where we can conceive. The ovulation is the release of the egg or two from the ovaries, and estrogen is at its highest. And then once we ovulate, if we ovulate, then progesterone gets secreted, and generally speaking, it's a high energy time. It's a
Hmm.
superwoman kind of archetype.
Yeah.
Um, again, like a lot more focus on the outside world, a lot more energy. On a psychological level, we have more ability to tend to other people's needs and put our own needs like to the back.
Yeah.
Um, High libido, things like that. And then as we come out of, so that's about 10 days or so. And again, it's for you to discern where that is for you. Because I get a
Yeah.
lot of people who ask me like, when is nice? When are the seasons? Like what days? But actually, I can't tell you that. It's really for you to decide after
Yeah.
tracking, and it will vary. Um, so then after summer, we come to autumn.
Yeah.
And for me, I usually can tell that I'm coming into autumn if I wake up feeling irritable or I remember one time I was in the supermarket. I was having a great week, and then I was in the supermarket and someone got in my way, and I got really annoyed, like inside me, right? It was like I had to like bite my tongue, say something. So that's usually how it like presents for me. Not as much emotional resilience as in the
Mm.
summer, and because what's happening is estrogen drops quite drastically after ovulation, and then there's a little bit of a lag before progesterone comes in. But the start of the summer, kind of like the spring, it's also that like it's a transition season, so it's quite varied. And the start can be very productive, very focused. It's kind of a no bullshit kind of time of the cycle. You're just kind of getting through things.
Yeah.
And then as we move towards menstruation, when hormones drop down and become more tender, PMS will start to present or can irritability. But it's powerful. Like this, the autumn is powerful. And if you are someone who has a lot of pain in PMS, the more self care you can bring into just that week before your menstruation, the more you regulate your nervous system,
Mm.
the more anti-inflammatory foods you can get into your diet, the more you say no to things and create space,
Yeah.
the higher chances, at least, of an easier menstruation.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
yeah.
for sure. Like that's definitely something that I experienced where I used to be like crippled with fatigue, like so irritable, couldn't handle anything, like all, was just like totally overwhelmed. And, to the point that once I started reading more about PMD, I was like, oh my God, like, is this what I have? Like it was so I like it was so pronounced the difference once I started tracking. But then once I started
Mm.
bringing in those elements of self-care, like doing the nutrition stuff, adjusting my training, kind of managing my workload, um, just like giving yourself permission to, as you said, down tools, like just to chill a little bit. Where like, and again, it's hard. Like I guess, society champions doing more and all that stuff that comes with, I guess, the spring and the summer and all those kind of like the masculine energies, or the like yang energies, if you want to kind of refer to it as that. So that when you actually take that time, it can feel really almost anxiety inducing itself the first few times. And, even now, sometimes when I'm like, oh my God, I've got so much to do and I blah, blah, blah. And it's, that can almost be a challenge in itself. But like once I started doing that, it made such a difference. Like, didn't have the same sort of pain, didn't have the same sort of, um, like fatigue, then actually felt good. So like, I guess like the highs of that spring and summer were way more noticeable because I was actually giving myself that time to rest. And so it really is just like a powerful thing that not everyone's going to feel it to that extreme level. Some people might not notice those changes, but just even tuning into them can be such a powerful, I guess, way of just getting to know yourself better and kind of like looking after yourself a little bit better as well, which I think is huge.
That's amazing, Sinead. Yeah, yeah. I love hearing that you just how you integrated that into your life, and it's so true. Like that is a really good example of nervous system stuff there, right? Because if
Completely.
we take on too much, I'm sure you see this in your own work. If you suddenly try to change how you relate to the world, it's
Yeah.
going to rattle your system, right? Even if it is meaning, oh, I need to take on more rest time. That
Mm.
can actually be quite anxiety inducing because our nervous system thinks differently to what our head thinks, right? So it needs to be those small incremental, like 1% changes over time. And then also looking at, okay, what part of this is internalized patriarchy,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Basically, that's what it
I
is,
know.
It's like, it's not our fault.
I know. It is. And it's hard, I guess, like when you're reading all of this, like you do get a bit like, yeah, wait, hold on a second. Like why are we all working like the normal working week and all this kind of stuff, because it is very difficult. And I get a lot of clients kind of asking me, well, how do I do this and how do I manage my work and all this kind of stuff? And it's, even with training and stuff, like a lot of people who play sports, they're like, yeah, but like, can I actually not train that hard? And, it's very difficult when you're trying to like succeed in your job or succeed in your sport, or even just kind of, I guess, live in the world of social media or whatever it might be, to not always be on and not always be on in that kind of structured way. But I think, we'll go into a little bit more detail now, and I'm really glad you brought up the 1% thing, because I think it's just like a game changer when it comes to that kind of self-care stuff. But it is difficult because like the world is set up for people who aren't living cyclical lives for the most part, as in like it's based on a structure of, I guess, and it is very like feminist, but it's important to realize that like it's actually set up. The working week is set up for people who have a steady state of testosterone and don't have any fluctuations in their hormone, for want of a better word. Like that's, they, for lads, like they wake up in the morning, they have a peak of testosterone, and then it kind of diminishes a little bit towards the evening, and it's pretty much like that for their whole life, from teenage years up into to kind of to old age, where that's 100% not the case for us at all. And that's not even discussing the kind of area of perimenopause and menopause and everything. So
Oh,
um
100%.
it
Yeah.
does it does kind of awaken a little bit of that in you, where you're like, oh wait, hmm,
Oh,
how do I do that? But I think, like, do you want to talk a little bit more about that 1% thing? Because I think that's definitely something that I took away for myself, but also recommend to my clients a lot as well, as just kind of that slow and steady approach. So
yeah, yeah, thanks, Sinead. Just to go back, just to give an example as well before I explain that, when I started this work, which was like, I don't know, about 6, 7 years ago at this stage,
mm,
I was really overwhelmed actually with the seasonal stuff, and just being like, oh my God, like learning this for the first time. And
mm,
then I read Woman Code, Elisa Vitti. I
yeah,
know you've read
yeah,
all books, so Elisa,
yeah,
Elisa Vitti's book, and she has a lovely program on diet and like syncing
mm,
your cycle with your diet. And I was just like, oh my God, it's way too much. Like I can't do that.
mm,
And so I actually spent like 2 years just observing my cycle and processing emotions around my seasons. And that was kind of all I did. And then my sort of physical, and it'll be different for people because it'll be different depending on what it is you're focusing on. But in terms
mm,
of exercise, like exercise and syncing my cycle with my sort of movement practice, that was like the last thing I did. That was like
yeah,
last year I did that. So like, because it took me like 2 years to kind of like get this sort of embodied, sort of
yeah,
for it to be kind of natural. So on the back of that, so the 1% that Sinead's just mentioned is in Red School, Alexandra and Shani, that's where I trained. They teach this practice called 1%, which all it is really is, learning this stuff in your head, but then giving yourself permission to make just 1% changes. So if you have, if you're, you have period pain for whatever reason, chronic period pain or any kind of period pain, and you want to lessen that, and you come across this work, you come across Sinead's work, you come across my work or whatever, and you learn this whole thing. It's not about like doing everything we say and everything that's in all of our content that we have. It's really
yeah,
just picking one easy thing. Like it could just be on the days of your period wearing more comfortable clothing, and doing that for a few months. Or it could be prepping your meals before your period and doing that for a few months, or asking your partner or someone in your family for a little bit more help,
hmm,
plucking up courage to do that, because that can be quite a vulnerable thing to do, to ask for help around this stuff.
yeah,
Um, so really like looking at that, because and another thing I love as well is that this doesn't have to be about action. This can actually be about the energetic approach we bring to the day. So if I'm, as long like I know this work inside out at this point in my head, it doesn't
hmm,
mean that's perfect, right? And
no, of course
if
not.
I'm yeah, right. And if I'm on day one and I have loads of clients or meetings, or I have an interview or something, and I feel really vulnerable, um, not canceling everything if I don't have to. Sometimes I do, but
Yeah,
but like asking myself, like, what can I do to support myself? How can I hold myself tenderly in this really vulnerable place that my body's in right now, and also show up with a little bit of myself and hold back some of my energy, so it's
yeah,
that energetic thing, of like, I don't have to give all of myself in this exchange, or in this work meeting, you know depending on what's going on. And how can I just, and it's that ability to start to build that inner presence with yourself, with the vulnerability of menstruation, which is, I think, quite a vulnerable thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, just to recap, it's like it can be really small actions, or it can just be an inner sort of companionship with yourself.
Yeah.
Putting on a shawl, having a hot water bottle when no one sees you, when you're on Zoom,
Yeah.
that kind of thing makes
But
huge difference.
I think the working from home, I guess the like the forced mass experimentation that we've had now globally of like working from home and that kind of more, um, I guess, uh, I was going to say freedom of choice when it comes to working. When actually we're not free to make decisions because we're all supposed to be working at home. But I guess that flexibility might suit some people and might not suit others, and it might suit where hopefully maybe going forward where there is that little bit more flexibility, that if you know that you feel certain ways around times of your period, that maybe that's a time that you're like, okay, I'm going to work most of those days at home if I don't have meetings, so I can stay at home and be in kind of comfier clothes or kind of be near food, and I don't really have to like socialize with the other people in the office if I don't have to. And then when I'm feeling good, you can go in and you can have the chats and all that kind of stuff. Like definitely for me as a coach in the gym, like it wasn't until we kind of came into the lockdowns and really like first lockdown, then went back into the gym again, and now back into another lockdown, that I was like, whoa, I definitely can manage my energy a lot better. Now, again, this is just purely my own experience. Other people are going to have very, very different experiences, but I was shocked how, for me, it was so much more manageable not having to physically be in the gym surrounded by people all the time and coaching. And it's a much more, I guess, I can't remember what the word, like, I guess, reserved way of sharing yourself on the screen rather than in the gym where you're physically
Yeah.
present and having to coach. And if you're taking classes, it's very like, you've got to own that presence and stuff like that. So I think it's been a really interesting, I guess, like experience to kind of see how different that is. And I know for me as well, I find it, I know what I'm going to be like now if I'm in my autumn or my winter, or phase 4 or phase 1 for most people, where like I'm just not going to be able to. I always say my words wrong. I'll always, if people probably look back at my mobility classes and notice that like the same week every month, I'm like always getting my feet, my hands mixed up, and I'll always say the wrong things and stuff like that. So like where possible, I try not to put in talks around that time, but it's not always the case. Can't always manage it. But if I can avoid trying to do a workshop or a video or whatever, that I try and not put them in my calendar. So I have a little like red week that I just have in my calendar to be like, try not like phase 4 and phase 1 kind of put in, or the first few days of bleeding, just so I'm like, okay, if possible, try not to do too much on
Yeah.
these days, and then go for it when I'm feeling good. So is there
I
anything
think
else, like,
that's,
do you do that for yourself, or
yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. I think that's the ultimate act of self-care for a cycling person, really. Like, to honor that time, to give yourself permission to, because there's also this pressure in the feminist movement, pre this feminist movement, which is
mm,
like, well, I should be able to do whatever I want. And then you have these, your
yeah,
Tampax on the roller coasters and the white jeans. And like,
yeah,
that was never my experience, So like, I think when I discovered this work, I was like, thank God I can actually just be a bit of a mess on my period.
yeah,
Great,
yeah, exactly,
right? And there's no shame in that, and it's just really just letting your body rest. But yeah, I do, like, I would still get pain, so I have to do that, Sinead. I have to pace myself
mm,
in my first 2 days of my menstrual cycle. And I've gotten pretty good at the practical things, like I call it preparing my nest. So
yeah,
making sure my apartment is clean sheets. I love clean sheets. They're the
yeah,
best. Having lots of food in the fridge, like fresh, healthy food in the fridge, and just things like, I like to take ginger, turmeric tablets. Sometimes I need a painkiller, so just making sure I have them available around me, and
yeah, yeah,
ginger, lemon, that kind of stuff. So and then in terms of my schedule, like, I'll always have an idea of when my cycle is coming. But again, I try to not be too hyper vigilant around it
mm,
either, because my experience is that I come from pain, and a lot of I can default into fear mode and fight and flight mode very quickly. If I do something wrong, in
yeah,
my
yeah,
right. So I have to kind of be mindful of that, and prioritize pleasure, prioritize, just like you said, calming down a little bit, enjoying myself. But and yeah, like you, I also find it easier working from home as well. I've worked in
mm,
offices, and in different roles before I started this work, and I actually found that very difficult, particularly with this condition that I had before I was diagnosed. But I did find out though that if there are people on here that are curious about, your office environment, where the future is going and that kind of thing in women's health. Again, I'm not a legal expert, obviously, but
Yeah.
a company does have a duty of care to its employees. So if you do have a condition like PMDD or endometrial, or just painful periods, doesn't matter if you're
Mm.
struggling with perimenopause and you're still able to do your job, but you just need a little bit of accommodation around certain workplace conditions, then the company is actually required to legally to kind of put those conditions in place for you. So it's definitely worth like talking to your employer, seeking out what options there are, because you might be able to get a little bit more flexibility if you need that for yourself.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. So I know there's kind of there's a lot of more work and more kind of like knowledge that's coming out about that being like, okay, well, actually, how do we accommodate women who might be suffering with endometriosis or pain or PMDD, and it is a cyclical thing, or as you say, going through perimenopause and just trying to navigate that in general, and like it's removing that taboo of it being like a thing that they have to deal with on their own and shame, and it's actually just being like, okay, well, no, it's just a normal part of being a woman, and there's going to be 20% with this, and 10% this, and it's all of this kind of I guess approach to just making it a more equitable place, and kind of balancing that as well. And also, like, now we know that you don't need to be in the office all the day. Some people might want to be in the office every single day and it not be an issue for them, but we need to understand that there might be other people who don't, and how do we kind of best accommodate them and let them thrive as well, I think is so important. But one of the things I was really curious about, because I know I've heard you talk about it before, but I'm sure other people haven't, is you do a lot of creative work. So, which I think is great. But do you kind of work with your cycle around that at all, or do you kind of try to, I guess, tune into that type of energy at different stages of your cycle, or do you kind of just let it happen?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely both. That's a really good question, mate. What I do, I suppose, a lot of my creative work in the past was predominantly creative writing,
Mm.
but now I haven't been creative writing as much. But a lot of my work is quite creative when I'm thinking about working with clients and just courses that I'm offering. Um, I do both. So I do consider like where I am in my cycle, what my energy levels are like,
Mm.
in order to get certain types of work done. But then also, and I'll kind of go into that in a bit more detail in a second, but I also take the teachings from menstrual cycle awareness and apply it to creativity.
Okay.
So what, practically speaking, if I'm like in pain, and there is this teaching as well, and I have experienced it, where when we can regulate the nervous system as much as we can when we're on our period, and if we have the privilege of space, then what can happen is when we bring presence to ourselves and bring presence to the body, that can allow for the certain brain centers to open, and it's like we can get downloads of creative ideas. So, and I've seen that in a lot of clients as well, where they will get a lot of just ideas and inspiration coming through premenstrually, usually menstrually.
Hmm.
But the lesson on this is to not take action on that immediately, because you're physically in that vulnerable place and they're literally just ideas coming in. So even though they are quite seductive and they're exciting,
Mm.
if you act on them immediately and start running out into the world with them, two things can happen. You can burn out, which I've done, and also your creative ideas can be trampled on by your own and the world's critic, right? So it's important to write them down in a diary, put them to the side, or keep them logged in the back of your mind,
Hmm.
and like accept the gift of creativity, but not take action immediately. And you're kind of courting it in a way. You're kind of, and as you journey with the cycle, when you come into spring, that spring energy is that playful energy. It's estrogen starting to increase.
Hmm.
So can you bring some of that into your thing? So I will play with the idea a little bit, play around with it in my head, maybe talk to only my partner about it or one other
Yeah.
friend, and bounce it out a bit, get in the sandpit, no inner critic,
Yeah.
And even just to observe if it sticks or not. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes I can get a creative idea and then like 2 weeks later, I have no interest in it. So
Yeah.
it comes later, right? So it's like you're kind of dating it, right? You know, you're flirting with this creative idea. So then moving it through the cycle, and then summer is, you know, that more action oriented time. That's when you might start to actually do things with it. And then
Hmm.
autumn is the same action, but also autumn is also that editing time. It's the time where we look at it really honestly and be like, okay, it's not all amazing. Like what bits can be removed?
Yeah.
So so that can actually happen in sync with your cycle, or it can just happen that cyclical, like those archetypes of an idea being born, you know, creative playfulness, manifestation, and then editing. Those are lessons learned from those seasons, and we can journey
Yeah.
them. Say if you have a book you're writing and it takes you a few years to write, you can go through those seasons for a few months. Do you know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
you have, because you know the seasons, you can discern where you are in that particular place. Like I have a project at the moment in my head and I kind of know it's in spring. Do you know, that kind of way? It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
like it has to be done much with it, but it's there. And so yeah, so that's kind of how I love this seasonal piece because it has the action and then surrender side. It has, like, you know, doing and then, you know, releasing, and then it's
Yeah.
important when you come back to winter with a project. It's important to walk away from creativity sometimes, or if you have
Mm.
writer's block or whatever, you know, you're not getting any ideas or you're stuck or something. Sometimes it's a great idea to allow yourself to have a winter and just walk away, do something else. And then it's as if magic happens. Like sometimes the solution like knocks on the door, you know, it just comes to you. But it's kind of learning how to do that without doing
Yeah.
it.
I know. I know. I think it's like, is it the hold the tension, or how is it described in the? It's like holding the tension between the different seasons, and kind of like, or the different kind of stages, and trying to not rush out too quickly into that doing phase, and trying to, I guess,
Yeah,
like manage the transition, which I think is really hard. It seems easy, but it's really
it's
not.
it requires a lot of trust and
Mm,
patience, and yeah, hold the tension is the inner autumn, and then take dictation from the divine is that
okay.
when you get the download and then you write it down, but you might not do anything with it. So, and I've seen a lot, and I've worked with a lot of people who are like hyper creative, almost they're constantly getting ideas, but it's not really realistic then to be able to manifest
Mm,
them all. So it's like you're building a relationship with creativity, and it's not all yours to own. You know, you
yeah.
have to discern what bits you do and what bits you're kind of dancing with. You know,
Yeah.
and it gets a lot easier over time. Like start with I'd say if you're going to start a creative process with these teachings, like start with writing down the idea first,
Hmm.
that playful time. And then, you know, as you start to kind of manifest a little bit and give yourself a few hours or a day where you just go for a walk and you don't think about it. You know, you
Hmm.
listen to a podcast, something different. Um, and it sometimes it just feeds the creativity a bit. It's kind of
Yeah.
mystical.
Yeah, well, actually, on that, I was going to ask you as well, where I know you're talking about like that creative download, and kind of and in the red book, or sorry, in the red school with the wildfire book, they talk about kind of like that culture retreat and stuff. I'm sure you might have seen it in my stories, but I put up, so last week I was like, I'm just going to talk about what my autumn or my luteal phase is, because like I'm just going to try and, I guess, like normalize it, that like you can go a little bit screwy, or these things can happen and everything. But I always get crazy vivid dreams, like so, as if like they actually happened, and like, people back in my life, and or things that have happened, and it's like really kind of like a strange experience. But I put it up out of curiosity as a yes and no, and I can't remember what it was, but it was something like 90% or something, where like, yeah, I get mad dreams. I'm like, no way, that's so interesting. So I was curious, as if it was like, oh, is it possibly linked to that sort of, that call to retreat, or what, whatever the kind of the term is, I guess, with those creative downloads that you were kind of referencing there.
Is that in your luteal phase? Did you say the
Yeah,
dreams?
yeah, the
Yeah,
dreams.
I'm doing a sleep course at the moment with
Oh,
Tom Coleman. I
interesting.
don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yeah.
He is an Irish sleep expert, and he has actually talked about female sex hormones in the sleep course, which I was
Okay,
highly
cool.
impressed.
Yeah,
So,
great one.
because the same thing as you said before, right? The all the teachings and the books on sleep are all based on men's bodies, right? So, and
Mm,
women's needs and experiences of sleep are going to subtly or not so subtly change in the cycle and then change throughout life, coming up to menopause. And so what's happening is progesterone is the hormone that soothes the nervous system, and it has an impact on our sleep. So I think it could be
mm,
something to do with that on a physiological level, Sinead. And I know I experience the same thing. I get like really vivid dreams premenstrually, and then I struggle to sleep like the day before my period.
mm.
It's like, yeah, really vivid. And I think it's just, something to do with progesterone. But yeah, on a psycho-spiritual level, the inner autumn, the luteal phase, the week before menstruation, is a more shamanic time of the menstrual cycle. We have
Okay.
and what I mean by that is that in spiritual language, like the veils are thin between the worlds. Like like our hormones are dropping, so our
Mm,
container of our physicality becomes thinner,
yeah.
and and even like practically speaking, we get irritable by things that don't normally irritate us, right? So we
Yeah.
have like less of a filter. So it's the same thing with creativity. We're kind of more hypersensitive, more open, and I just think that with the progesterone and what hormones are doing and what's happening, we just have more access to those parts of the brain for creativity. And some people, and I've seen this, like some people, especially people I think who do have PMDD, tend to be the people who are more like the highly sensitive people,
Mm,
um, more creative, more spiritually connected, and they have what they would describe as psychic abilities, things like that. They can tune into things and experience things. So like I just hear stories. I don't like
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
can't explain what it is, but it's definitely a more shamanic time of the cycle where we have more our inner kind of witchy kind of part of us is like online there, let's just
Yeah.
say.
She is, yeah, yeah. No, it's cool. I'll have Liz McDonald who on next week who she's over in Australia, but she does energy work and she's called the Meditating Mama. And I joined her groups kind of like through a client, and Liz was a client of mine and all this kind of stuff. So it's this lovely like cyclical thing. But
Wow.
I did any of that work since I was a kid, and I call them like my magical mystery tours because I literally she takes us on like visualization and like chakras and stuff, and I actually go off to like another planet and like so I'll always come back out of those sessions and like be like Craig was like, "Where were you today?" And I was like, "Well," I just like say the maddest of the stuff. So I'll have to try and see if they change at all, or I can kind of drop into a little bit more with my cycle and stuff because I haven't actually been kind of tracking that. But it's definitely, I think it's I think for some people they I guess experience energies in a more visual manner or more kind of in a I guess a sensory manner, all this kind of stuff. So it would be kind of interesting to see now if I track that if it kind of goes across it. But
That is so interesting. I love that. I think it's so real, and it's like it's everyone's experience is so different. I would describe myself as sensitive. I wouldn't be psychic or anything, but like
mm,
I've had things happen to me that I just can't explain, and there'd be definitely be days in my cycle where I'm more tuned. Like my sensitivity would show up with people. So
mm,
like if there's something off, say between me and my boyfriend, like I'll just feel it. Do you know what I mean? Like it won't be based on it. And then I'll say it to him and he'll be like, well, of course, like because he just
yeah,
isn't surprised, like because feel something. And then we don't even know what it is. And then we start talking and then there is something, there is something
yeah,
there. And it's just attunement to yourself, attunement to other things. And our nervous systems are constantly kind of on, like we have our senses, we pick up on things around us.
mm,
So and some people are a lot more attuned and sensitive to that based on their nervous system, but also based on their upbringing and the kind of families and households they were raised in.
yeah, yeah. And I think for anyone who's kind of listened to this maybe and they're like, oh, sounds interesting, like, or I don't really kind of, maybe they're tracking their cycle, but they haven't really tracked it from, I guess, an emotional or kind of a spiritual sense or kind of the psycho-spiritual that you were talking about there. What would you kind of recommend to them from like that self-care piece or how to kind of start getting into this sort of space or this sort of, I guess, self-work?
Like the stuff that we just talked about, like the spiritual stuff,
Yeah,
or yeah.
just the cycle tracking in general. So like, I guess the moving with the seasons and how to kind of start incorporating that. Like, where would you recommend for someone to start if this is kind of totally new to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like keep it simple. So listen to this video or a few other podcasts, or you can read a book about it, and just start to be curious about the seasons. And then all you got to do is just track your cycle. So that's as simple as using an app. I like to use Clue, or you can use, there's loads of apps
Yeah,
nowadays. Find an app that you like and just like log in on your app day one, and then it remembers like where you are.
yeah,
And you can track things in. Now, I actually personally prefer to write. When I first started doing this, I prefer to write things down. So to write in your journal, I have these four headings: so physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and other. So physical would be any kind of like, and it's literally just the headlines of the day. You don't have to go,
yeah,
sort of like searching everything. Like physical could be, if anything stood out. So it could be your appetite, your bowel movements, pain, libido, anything that stood out. Mental is, how were your thoughts? Did you have a strong inner critic? Did you have a racing mind, or did you feel quite calm? Emotional, any emotions that stood out. And then spiritual is that piece, like, how did you feel connected to yourself? Did you feel desire to do your yoga or your meditation or whatever it is you do?
yeah,
Did you know, how do you feel connected to others in the world? And you can also write down dreams, or like a gratitude list, or anything else, like a fight with your partner, anything like, anything like that sort of stands out for you. And then over time, like after maybe 3, 4, or 5 months, when you look back, you'll see trends. It'll be easy to identify kind of what your spring looks like, what your autumn looks like, and
mm,
you know, and then it can lead to really knowing yourself on a really very deep level.
yeah, yeah. No, I think like the cycle tracking is a huge one. It's funny, like everyone I talk to in the area of, I guess, the menstrual health, but even the women's health, like, whether it's yourself or whether it's kind of me or whether it's someone like, I had Kelly McNulty who's on, and she's kind of PhD researcher into, like, sports and exercise linked to the menstrual cycle. So like all from very different backgrounds, but like the theme, I guess, that comes out in all of them, regardless of what kind of angle you're coming at, is just like track your cycle and see what your pattern is. It's like there's no set way to be or to experience or to have. Yes, there's probably common trends that happen due to the hormones, but like even your reaction to hormones are going to be different. The amount of hormones you have are going to be different. Do you feel that drop, as you said, after estrogen? Like I massively feel that drop, or sorry, after you ovulate with the estrogen, because I was like, everyone's feeling great around ovulation, and I'm like, I don't really. But then I start feeling good again once I kind of, once things start picking up. Um,
Yeah.
where I was like, I'm not supposed to be feeling this way, but it always comes back to like what's your cycle, because it is going to be different for every person. I think spotting those trends is huge. Um, so yeah, I think it's great advice.
Yeah, no, it really is. And like you say, like I don't think I can reiterate that enough. It's not about and having another thing for us to put pressure on ourselves on. Do you
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like we had enough of that when we were teenagers. So this is actually meant to liberate us and to support us and to help us. And it's a very gentle, kind practice. So tracking in a way that works for you. Like some people love to write essays. Some people just want to write a keyword. Some people have a calendar on their fridge, and where their whole family can see. So really think about, like, sit down and think about like what would be easy for you, what would feel
mm,
nice for you to, you know, you can get journals. There's loads of journals on Amazon. I've got a journal.
yeah,
There's loads of things you can use. So um, just keep it. I think the most important thing when it comes to tracking, though, is to try and keep it consistent if you can, at
yeah,
least for a year. You do it for 1 year consistently, and then look back and see. It'll be interesting
yeah,
to see
yeah,
what
exactly. And I think,
happens.
this is, well, what would be your advice for someone maybe who's starting to do this work but wants to involve? Because that was really interesting that you said about the calendar being on the fridge, like maybe wants to involve their family members or maybe their partners or friends or housemates or anything. Kind of like, do you have any advice on that, or is that something that you see comes up a lot with your clients?
Yeah, it would be, especially for people who are struggling in some way. So
Mm,
um, it depends on the relationship, Sinead. Like like I generally see a lot of people who have families and partners who are very interested and willing to listen and learn. So that's, about making requests rather than demands of our loved ones. I definitely made the mistake of trying to like convert my partner immediately, and actually it's just like month by month, just a little bit every time, just to
Yeah.
kind of new teaching, like lower the expectations, but also just include them, and do what feels comfortable for you and what feels safe. And like it could be read a book together, or there's loads of podcasts, like
Yeah.
listen
Yeah.
to a podcast on cycle awareness together, even if it is just for 10 minutes, and then another 10 minutes another time. Or you can start to like drop little things in, like just, saying like, oh, I'm on my inner winter today, and would you mind making me a cup of tea, and taking
Yeah.
10 minutes I love that, like receiving, like when my partner makes me a hot water bottle, it's not the same as when I make it myself. It's
Yeah.
like
I
it
know.
has this different energy, so like letting yourself receive is huge as well in relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that asking for help piece as well is massive, where we probably don't do it enough, where you feel like you're maybe being selfish or self-indulgent or whatever that might be. But the thing is, when you're feeling good, and I know you kind of mentioned that as well, when people are in summer or spring, they tend to be a lot more capable of, I guess, supporting others. So it all kind of comes back around where perhaps you might need to take that time away yourself and go read the book on your own, or kind of ask for help with different things. But if we're kind of respecting those different energies and the different phases, then it's probably going to come back around, and you'll be in a much more present place to be able to kind of give to your loved ones, or kind of go spend more time or be more social and stuff like that. I just think it helps explain it as well. Like I know for me, for sure, it's a lot easier if I'm able to be like, look, I'm due my period, or on the first few days and I'm just feeling awful, and I can sit down and you kind of be a little bit more um I guess accepting, and kind of like in communicating that. And even with my
Yeah.
clients, having that relationship with them, that they can tell me that, so I can adjust how they're feeling or their training session or what they're doing, their habits and stuff like that is great, because it is such an integral part of what people are doing. And so yeah, I think asking
It's
for help is a big one.
it's beautiful, Sinead. It's absolutely gorgeous that you're doing that. And I think what I've learned as well, I'm sure the same, is that people don't judge actually as much as we think they do, and
Yeah,
people love
yeah,
people love to help, right? Even if it is just like make tea or something, or do the cleaning or something like that. It's like actually when you make that request, like at least that's my experience.
yeah. No,
So,
no, it's true. It's true. No, it definitely is. I think, you kind of mentioned there's a few courses there where, like, say, if people are listening, they were kind of curious about kind of working with you or learning more about this, or kind of getting, I guess, support to kind of guide them through how to do this sort of work. Kind of what I guess do you offer? Like, do you have courses available? Are you kind of doing one-to-ones, or how was
yeah,
someone
thanks,
get
Sinead.
involved?
Yeah, I do courses and one-to-ones. So at the moment, I don't have a course. I have a self-guided course that you can take on my website, which you can find in my bio. And then I do private coaching, and I have space for that at the moment. But come the end of the summer and September, I'll be doing my self-care and the menstrual cycle course for
Oh,
people who want
brilliant.
to learn this work, and then also I'll be doing professional training. So
Super.
that will be, yeah, the next thing for, I don't know, teachers, whoever wants to kind of learn from me.
Yeah.
So that's what I do.
Yeah.
And I have free
Brilliant.
consultations for my coaching as well. So
Okay, perfect. No, I think as well, like you can see it's coming out more and more in, I guess, the health and fitness world, about kind of menstrual cycle awareness, and like even in kind of the yoga space or the movement space and all this kind of stuff. So I'm sure there's going to be loads of people who kind of want to dig into that a little bit more, like be able to bring it into their coaching or their teaching, or even just I guess their own experiences as well. So no, it's gonna be cool. I'll look forward to.
yeah,
I'll bookmark that one.
I've been working with a few psychotherapists actually, which is really cool because it's great to link it in with mental health,
Mm.
so I've really been enjoying that piece. It's relevant in so many fields, I think,
Yeah,
so
no,
yeah.
it really is. It's no, it's also linked to our overall health and our mental health and everything. And I think it's just kind of through conversations like this, just like normalizing it and having a chat and being like, well, actually, did you know there's different seasons? Or you can look at it from a different approach. Say if if this doesn't suit someone, you can look at it from more of a, I guess, a physiological point of view. Or if that doesn't suit someone, they can look at it from kind of the more kind of emotional well-being point of view. And actually, there's so many similarities in those different styles, it's just different language and kind of different, I guess, emphases or emphasis on different aspects of it. But no, it's cool. I think just having these conversations just makes it a more and more normal topic and kind of helps change the narrative around it, which I think is massive. So yeah, it was so good having you on. I'm like, the time has flown.
Yeah,
um,
thanks for having me, Sinead. It's
yeah,
been
no
lovely.
problem at all. I'll be saving this down on this, and I'll make sure to tag you in it so that people can find you as well. I can't tag the Red School for whatever reason because they're having some issue
No,
with
I know they
Instagram.
know that themselves. I know
Yeah,
it's a disaster, but sure,
I know.
people know who they are.
I'll write it down in like a non-way that Instagram will like destroy my post because every time I try and tag them, it like deletes everything, and I'm like, well, okay, so but I will reference them in some way that so people can find the book and find the course and all that kind of stuff as well. But thank you so much for coming on. It was fab as always. Thanks, Green. Have a lovely Friday night. Enjoy yourself.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Sinead. Bye. See
Bye,
you.
Lisa. Enjoy.